Hey guys. Tonight we race slipping beneath the waves into something truly wild. A hidden library buried deep under the sea. Stuffed with ancient Egypt's long-lost ocean secrets yet. You heard that right, the same civilization that gave us pyramids and mummies apparently had a serious side hustle with the big blue. Imagine trading your sandy desert boots for flippers and diving into history nobody teaches in school. Fair warning. If you tried this in real life, you'd probably last about 30 seconds before needing a hot cocoa and a towel. Lucky for us, we were doing this the cozy way, snuggled under blankets. Lights low. No oxygen tank required. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here. 2. One sleepy soul at a time, but for now, just breathe, allow your eyes to grow heavy and your body to soften, and let the hush of winter carry you to sleep. Let's begin. You ray floating weightless in warm, midnight blue water. The surface is far above, a faint silver shimmer that feels like another world entirely down here. Everything moves slow, your arms drift lazily at your sides. Tiny bubbles rise from your lips in gentle spirals, and the only sound is the soft whoosh of your own breath mixed with the distant, dreamy hum of the ocean itself. No rush, no noise, just the quiet pull of a current that's decided you ray going exactly where it wants you to go. Tonight, ahead, something catches the faint light, a massive arch of weathered stone half buried in the seafloor, almost completely camouflaged by swaying coral and drifting sea fans. It's huge, easily tall enough for a city bus to swim through. And as you glide closer, you realize the stone is carved, not randomly weathered, but deliberately etched with rows of symbols you've seen 1,000 times in textbooks. Hieroglyphs, birds, eyes, reeds, snakes, all perfectly preserved under centuries of gentle saltwater polishing. You reach out and brush your fingers across them. They feel cool and smooth, like river stones worn down by time. You pause there, hovering in front of the arch, because something about this doesn't add up. Everyone knows ancient Egyptians were river people, obsessed with the Nile, building everything along its banks, measuring their whole year by its flood cycle. The sea, that was the chaotic unknown, the edge of the world where monsters lived. Yet here's this enormous doorway, clearly built by Egyptian hands, sitting proudly on the bottom of the Mediterranean, like it's been waiting for visitors all along. A soft pulse of bioluminescent plankton lights up around you, as if the ocean itself is turning on a nightlight. In that glow you spot more details. The arch is flanked by 2 colossal statues, seated figures in the classic pharaoh pose, hands on knees, tall headdresses, calm stone faces staring straight ahead, except these aren't on land guarding a temple. They ray down here, draped in soft algae beards and crowned with tiny animals that wave like feather plumes. One of them even has a curious octopus perched on its shoulder, tentacles lazily curled around the name's head cloth, like it's claiming the throne for itself. You can't help but smile. Sorry, Your Majesty. Looks like you've got a new roommate. You drift between the statues and through the arch. The current gives you the gentlest nudge forward, almost polite, like a librarian motioning you to keep moving. Inside, the space opens into a vast chamber, so large you can barely see the far walls. The seafloor here is smooth white sand, glowing faintly, and above you the ceiling is lost in darkness. But what really stops you in your tracks are the shelves. They rise in neat rows on every side, tall, elegant racks made of dark stone, each one holding hundreds of rolled scrolls, not modern paper, but papyrus, thick bundles of ancient Egyptian writing material, somehow perfectly intact after thousands of years underwater. You reach out and touch one. It is sealed inside a thin, transparent coating that feels almost like glass, but flexes slightly under your fingertip. Waterproofing technology from 1500 BC. Apparently so. Whoever built this place wasn't taking any chances with their archives. As you float deeper into the hall, you notice faint currents swirling around the shelves, keeping the sand from settling and the scrolls gently swaying. Like kelp in a forest, it is peaceful in a way that makes your shoulders drop without you even realizing it. You've always pictured ancient libraries as dusty, echoing rooms full of stern scholars shushing you. This one feels alive, breathing with the ocean, lit by drifting specks of light, quiet enough that you can almost hear the stories whispering to be read. A mainstream fact settles in your mind as you drift along. Historians know the Egyptians traded across the Mediterranean as early as 2500 BC, swapping grain and gold for timber and copper, but seeing it like this row upon row of records preserved on the seafloor makes it feel brand new. These weren't just occasional boat trips. This was serious maritime business. Then comes the odd little detail that makes you grin. Among the neat papyrus rolls, you spot a few sealed jars containing what look like tiny model boats complete with oars and sails. No bigger than your hands. Scholars argue these were either votive offerings to sea gods or training tools for young navigators. But honestly, they are adorable, like someone packed their childhood toy collection for eternity. And of course, academics still debate fiercely whether this entire underwater complex is real or mythology. Some say Egyptian priests deliberately sank sacred texts to protect them from invaders. Others insist no such library ever existed outside legend. You're literally floating through it right now, so the debate feels delightfully far away. The current tugs you onward. Deeper between the shelves, the water grows a touch warmer, the light a shade brighter, and you feel that pleasant heaviness starting to settle behind your eyes. No hurry, there is plenty more to see. And the ocean is patient tonight. The gentle current that guided you through the grand arch now nudges you forward again. As if the library itself is politely turning the page, you drift out of the vast entrance chamber and into a narrower passage. Its walls lined with smooth limestone blocks that gleam faintly, the deep blue gloom. Tiny fish dart in and out of the cracks, like silver commas punctuating an ancient sentence. The water feels a fraction cooler here, carrying the faint scent of salt and stone. And you let your fingertips trail along the wall just to feel something solid in this weightless world. Ahead, the passage opens into a massive circular chamber dominated by a single, enormous stone door set into the seafloor. It is at least 30 feet tall, carved from a single slab of red granite, and half covered in a living tapestry of soft corals that sway like theater curtains. The door is cracked open just enough for you to slip through sideways, no dramatic pushing required. Thank goodness. Because let us be honest, you're here for the stories, not an underwater gym session. As you glide closer, the carvings on the door catch the faint bioluminescent glow. Row upon row of hieroglyphs spiral outward from the center. But these aren't the usual praises to Ra or offerings to Osiris. These are ships, dozens of them long, elegant vessels with high prows curved like lotus flowers and single square sails billowing in an invisible wind. Oars bristle along the sides like centipede legs, and tiny figures stand on deck holding ropes or steering with massive quarter oars. You float there for a moment, just taking it in, because this door is basically ancient Egypt's version of a "We Love Boating" bumper sticker. You squeeze through the gap, and the chamber beyond steals whatever breath you have left. It as a perfect dome, the ceiling lost in darkness far above, and the floor is a mosaic of polished turquoise and lapis lazuli that somehow still shines after millennia. In the center stands a colossal stone pedestal, and rising from it is a relief so detailed it feels like a freeze frame from a movie. A pharaoh in full regalia, tall blue and gold headdress, false beard, crook and flail crossed over his chest, pointing dramatically toward the horizon while a fleet of ships stretches out behind him. You drift around the pedestal slowly, taking in every angle, and realize this isn't just any pharaoh. The cartouche beside his feet reads User Kof, or maybe Sayur 5th Dynasty, Old Kingdom. Around 2500 BC, mainstream history books love to remind us that these guys were building massive pyramids on the Giza Plateau. What they mention less often is that the same pharaohs were apparently daydreaming about becoming admirals. A little quirky detail makes you smile. Tucked among the grand ships in the relief are a couple of comically tiny rafts made of bundled papyrus reeds, each carrying what looks like a single fisherman with a spirit like the artist. Couldn't resist adding the ancient equivalent of a guy in a rubber dinghy photobombing a naval parade. Scholars think these reed boats were the everyday workhorses of the Nile, but seeing them here next to ocean-going vessels feels like a gentle reminder that even the mightiest empires started small. You float upward a bit to get a better look at the sails on the big ships. They ray marked with giant eyes wide open, stylized human eyes staring forward. Egyptologists call these eyes of Horus and agree they were meant to help the ship see its way through danger, but here's where the debate gets fun. Some historians insist the Egyptians were strictly coastal huggers, too nervous to lose sight of land, while others point to these very reliefs and argue they were bold open water sailors who trusted celestial navigation. Academics are still arguing over whether those big eyes were magical protection or practical wayfinding symbols. Down here, surrounded by the quiet and the slow sway of sea plumes, both sides feel right. The current circles you gently around the pedestal one more time, almost like it's making sure you've memorized every detail. You notice smaller panels around the base showing shipwrights at work. Teams of men hauling enormous cedar logs down to the water. Others bending planks over fires to curve them into hull cedar. By the way, didn't grow in Egypt, they imported it all the way from Lebanon. Imagine ordering your lumber from another country 3,000 years before express shipping existed. That's commitment. As you linger, a school of tiny silverfish swims through the relief, darting in and out of the carved oars as if they were playing hide and seek with history. One particularly bold fish pauses right in the carved pharaoh's eye, blinking at you like it's winking on behalf of the entire Old Kingdom. You can help the soft laugh that escapes. Bubbles rise lazily toward the invisible ceiling, and for a moment everything feels perfectly absurd in the best possible way. The water temperature shifts again, warmer now, inviting a faint glow begins to pulse from a corridor leading off to the right. Soft gold against the deep indigo. The library isn't done with you yet. Somewhere ahead, those cedar ships are waiting to tell you how they actually got built. And you're already curious about the ancient equivalent of tracking a late delivery. No rush, though you let the current carry you toward the light, body relaxed, mind drifting. The great stone door closing silently behind you like a bookmark slid gently into place. The golden glow from the corridor fades behind you as the current carries you into a new hall, wider and taller than the last. Stretching out like an endless underwater cathedral, you slow your drift, letting your body turn lazily in the water, because what surrounds you now demands a full, unhurried look. Rows upon rows of stone shelves rise in perfect parallel lines, each one packed with papyrus scrolls sealed in their protective coatings, thousands of them, tens of thousands. They sway gently in the microcurrents, pale cream and gold against the deep indigo, looking less like ancient documents and more like a field of seagrass whispering secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. You glide closer to the nearest shelf and let your fingers hover just above the rolls. Up close, you can see faint titles inked on the ends, cartridges, dates, Tiny ship icons cataloged with the same meticulous care the Egyptians used for everything from grain stores to star charts. These aren't random scraps. This is an organized archive. A deliberate underwater vault for knowledge most people assume floated away on the Nile or burned in some long-ago library fire. A soft pulse of light ripples across the hall, and for a moment every scroll glows faintly. As if acknowledging your arrival, you pick one at random, as random as the current allows, and unroll it just enough to glimpse the contents. Neat columns of hieroglyphs march down the page beside precise ink drawings of harbors, cargo manifests, and lists of goods: linen, ebony, elect rum, jars of honey, bundles of papyrus ironically exporting their own writing material. Mainstream history confirms the basics. By the New Kingdom, Egypt was running regular trade routes across the eastern Mediterranean, swapping wheat and gold for Cypriot copper and Mycenaean pottery. But seeing the sheer volume here, these aren't royal boasts carved in stone. These are everyday ledgers, makes the scale feel dizzying. You drift along the aisle, eyes scanning shelf after shelf. One section is dedicated entirely to ship inventories. How many oars? How much rope? How many amphorae of beer for the crew? Another holds contracts with foreign merchants, complete with witness seals pressed into clay, tags still dangling from the scrolls like price tags on forgotten antiques. And then you spot the quirky detail that makes you huff a quiet laugh into the water. A whole cluster of scrolls labeled with little drawings of monkeys, live monkeys apparently. Egyptian traders regularly brought back baboons and verves from distant lands as exotic pets for temples and nobles. One manifest even notes 12 monkeys. Very noisy. Feed extra dates to keep quiet. You can almost hear the ancient ship captain as exasperated. Note to self across 3,000 years. Further down, you come across a series of larger scrolls, almost posters, unrolled and mounted flat against the wall like museum displays. These show detailed maps, not the stylized world is flat monsters at edges kind you half expect, but surprisingly practical charts of coastlines, harbors, and prevailing winds. The delta ports of Peru, Nefer and Tanis feature prominently, marked with depth soundings and safe anchorages. Historians have long known about Egypt's maritime trade during their Ames side period, but the precision here sparks that familiar academic tug-of-war. Some scholars insist these maps prove sophisticated open sea navigation, while others argue the Egyptians stuck to coastal crawling and simple dead reckoning down here, floating among the evidence. The debate feels like background music, pleasant, but not urgent. A small side alcove catches your eye, lit by a cluster of glowing jellyfish that seem to have taken up permanent residence like living chandeliers. Inside, the shelves hold something different. Wooden writing boards coated in wax, the kind scribes used for drafts or quick notes. You pick one up light, buoyant, and see scratch tallies of shipments gone wrong. Storm off by Belos. Lost 40 jars oil. Crew drunk at Crete. Delayed 12 days. Captain sneeze. Broke amphora didek from pay. Everyday mishaps preserved forever. Human and relatable. It is oddly comforting to know that even in 1200 BC, supply chain headaches were a thing. You linger there longer than you planned, drifting from shelf to shelf, letting the quiet enormity sink in. This isn't a treasure chamber glittering with gold. It is a working library of commerce, logistics, and far-flung connections. The Egyptians didn't just dip a toe in the Mediterranean, they dove in, built networks, kept receipts, and someone, for reasons still lost to time, decided all this paperwork was worth protecting. At the bottom of the sea, the current circles back, gentle but insistent, guiding you toward a brighter opening at the far end of the hall. You release the wax tablet, It settles softly onto its shelf as if it's glad to be home ahead. The light shifts to warm amber, and you catch a glimpse of massive wall paintings, vibrant scenes of ships under full sail, crews waving to distant shores. The library is ready to show you the grander dreams behind all these careful records. Your body feels heavier now, not from fatigue, but from that pleasant, deepening relaxation that comes when the mind is full and the world is quiet. You let the water carry you forward. No resistance, just soft surrender to whatever story waits next. The amber light from the Hall of Scrolls fades behind you as the current sweeps you into a vast, soaring gallery where the walls themselves become the story. You emerge into a space so large it feels like the ocean has opened its heart. The ceiling arches impossibly high, studded with tiny phosphorescent creatures that twinkle like a private constellation just for you. But it's the walls that pull you in, floor to distant ceiling. They ray covered in one continuous, breathtaking relief painting. Colors still vivid after thousands of years, protected down here. Ochre, lapis blue, emerald green, and gold that catches whatever faint light drifts through the water. You slow to a hover, turning in a lazy circle to take it all in. The scene wraps around you completely. A massive fleet of Egyptian ships under full sail, cutting across a stylized sea painted with wavy lines and leaping fish. At the center stands the pharaoh, tall, regal, arms outstretched in command, watching his navy depart for distant shores. You drift closer until you ray almost nose to stone with the royal figure. The cartouche confirms it. This is likely Senusr Edii or maybe Amin Mhatii. Middle Kingdom heavyweights around 1800 BC. Famous for military campaigns and canal building, mainstream history loves their fortress building along the Nile. But here's the grander dream carved in stone. They wanted to rule the waves too. The fleet is glorious. 5 enormous flagship vessels led the way. Each one longer than a football field if you trust the proportions, and ancient artists' warranty. Exactly, sticklers for scale. High prows curve upward like swan necks. Stern posts rise in lotus bud finials, and single square sails bulge with wind, painted in confident red and white stripes. Crew members swarm the decks, rowers at the ready, sailors climbing rigging, officers shading their eyes toward the horizon further back. Smaller escort ships bob along, loaded with soldiers in white kilts holding shields and spears. It's a full-on armada. The ancient Egyptian version of sending a carrier strike group on a world tour. You can help the soft chuckle that bubbles out when you notice the scale issue everyone quietly ignores. The pharaoh himself is drawn twice as tall as his own ships. Classic Egyptian art logic, importance equals size. So here's this towering ruler, basically Godzilla, stomping his navy while calmly pointing toward the land of Punt. That mysterious goddess lands somewhere down the Red Sea coast. Probably modern-day Somalia or Eritrea. Historians know these expeditions happened. Wall reliefs at Dei or El Berai show Queen Hatshepsut's later version, bringing back incense trees, panthers, and giraffes. But this earlier Middle Kingdom scene feels like the original blueprint. The pharaoh's big maritime flex. A quirky little detail catches your eye as you float along the lower register, among the cargo being loaded onto the ships. Right next to sensible crates of trade goods, there's a line of attendants carrying live baboons on leashes and a giraffe being led up a ramp that looks comically undersized. The giraffe has to duck dramatically, neck bent like it's boarding economy class on a budget airline. Scholars think these animals were diplomatic gifts or temple offerings. But the artist clearly had fun capturing the chaos of wrangling exotic wildlife onto wooden decks. You can almost hear the ancient dock foreman sighing. Not again with the giraffes. Higher up on the wall, smaller panels show the destination. Lush foreign terraces overflowing with incense trees. Ebony logs stacked like Lincoln logs. and locals with dark skin and pointed beards offering tribute ebony, ivory, panther skins. Throw sticks at us all they're in loving detail. And here's where the academic debate gets spicy. Some experts insist Punt was reached via an overland route or by hugging the Red Sea coast in tiny stages, arguing the Egyptians lacked true ocean-going tech for such distances. Others point to scenes exactly like this one and say no. They sailed direct, bold and confident down here in the hush of the gallery. Both arguments feel plausible, like distant voices you can tune out while you just enjoy the art. You drift slowly along the entire panorama, letting the current pace you like a museum docent who knows you've got all night. Tiny sea creatures add their own commentary, crabs scuttling across carved doors, a moray eel peeking out from behind a painted sail as if it has been hiding there since the 12th dynasty. The colors stay impossibly bright, protected from sun and air, and every time a swirl of plankton lights up, the whole scene glows for a heartbeat, like it's remembering its own glory days. Your body feels heavier now, that pleasant sinking sensation that means the story is working its magic. The Pharaoh's outstretched arm seems to point not just to Punt, but onward toward another corridor where the light shifts to a deeper cedar brown hue somewhere ahead. Those massive ships are waiting to reveal how they were actually built. Plank by plank, log by imported log. You let the water carry you that way. No hurry at all. The Grand Fleet sailing silently on the wall behind you. Forever heading out, never quite leaving the safety of this underwater dream. The warm cedar brown glow from the gallery of the Pharaoh's fleet fades gently as the current guides you into a narrower, almost intimate chamber. The walls here are closer, the water a touch denser, as if the library itself is leaning in to share a trade secret. You drift forward slowly, letting your hands trail along the smooth stone, until the space opens into a long rectangular hall lined with life-sized reliefs of shipyards in full swing. But what stops you mid-float is the scent, or rather, the memory of one. The rich, resinous aroma of fresh-cut cedar wood, somehow carried on the water like a ghost of sawdust from 3,000 years ago. You hover in the center of the hall, turning to take in the panorama. The reliefs show every stage of building those massive seafaring ships you just admired. Teams of workers haul enormous logs toward the docks, while others pit saw planks with the patience of saints. Overseers with scrolls check measurements, and shipwrights bend wood over steaming fires to curve the hulls into graceful arcs. Mainstream history is clear on this point. Egypt had almost no native timber suitable for big ships. Their salvation was the cedar forests of Byblos in modern-day Lebanon. Tall, straight, fragrant trees that became the backbone literally of Egyptian maritime power. Trade records from as early as the Old Kingdom show regular voyages north to fetch what they called Asiatic wood. But here's the quirky, almost unbelievable detail that makes you smile wide. The Egyptians didn't just sail up and chop down whole forests. They ordered their cedar in installments, like the ancient version of subscription lumber. Reliefs and texts show massive logs being cut to standard lengths in Lebanon, then lashed together into giant rafts that were floated south along the coast by Phoenician middlemen. Once they reached Egyptian ports, the logs were hauled overland or up the Nile in pieces too big for any single ship to carry whole. One particularly charming panel shows a train of oxen pulling a single cedar trunk so enormous that the artist drew tiny workers sitting on top having what looks suspiciously like a picnic break. Scholars call this disassembled shipbuilding. You call it the world's slowest and most expensive IKEA flat pack. You drift closer to one wall where a series of smaller scenes play out like comic strips. In the first, Egyptian envoys arrive at Byblos with gifts of gold and linen. In the next, local woodsmen fell trees under Egyptian supervision. Then the logs are branded with Pharaoh-esque cartridges like quality control stamps further along. You see the rafts arriving, hundreds of logs roped together, steered by tiny sailboats, looking like floating forests, the oddest touch. A few panels show Egyptian sailors tossing loaves of bread into the sea as offerings to keep the rafts safe. Apparently, the Mediterranean was notorious for sudden storms, and hungry crews believed well-fed sea gods were less likely to smash their delivery. A faint swirl of warmer water rises from below, carrying you upward toward the ceiling where a massive inlaid frieze shows the final assembly. Here the cedar planks are pegged together with wooden dowels, no nails. Because bronze was too precious and iron unknown, the joints are swollen tight with water once the ship is launched. A technique so clever it is still studied by modern boat builders. Historians agree this shell-first construction made Egyptian ships flexible enough to survive rough seas. But here's the ongoing debate that keeps conferences buzzing. Did they learn this from the Phoenicians, who were already master shipwrights? Or did they develop it independently? Some point to uniquely Egyptian details like the hogging truss cable that ran bow to stern to prevent sagging and insist homegrown genius. Others see clear Lebanese influence in the hull shapes down here, surrounded by the quiet evidence. You can almost hear both sides politely arguing over tea. You linger over one especially detailed section showing workers caulking seams with twisted papers, and resin. A foreman holds a mallet almost as big as he is. And beside him a small dog, yes, an actual dog, is curled up asleep on a pile of wood shavings. The artist even scratched in little curly shavings around the pup. It is such a human moment. Someone's shop dog napping through another long day at the boatyard, probably waiting for scraps of bread and fish. You feel that soft tug of connection. People then weren't so different, worrying about deadlines, keeping pets, complaining about supply delays. The current circles you once more, slow and reassuring, before guiding you toward a side passage where the light shifts to a deeper, star-speckled indigo ahead. You sense the night sky waiting, not the real one, but something the sailors trusted just as much. Your body is deliciously heavy now, muscles loose, thoughts soft around the edges. The scent of cedar lingers like a lullaby, and you let the water carry you onward. No resistance, just the gentle promise that the stars these ships followed are about to light up the dark for you too. The cedar scent lingers faintly as the current lifts you out of the shipyard hull and into a soaring, cylindrical chamber that feels more like a planetarium than a library wing. The walls curve smoothly upward, disappearing into perfect darkness. But the ceiling, oh, the ceiling is what steals every bit of your attention. It is inlaid with thousands of tiny flecks of gold and lapis lazuli, arranged into precise constellations that glow softly against an indigo backdrop. You tip backward in the water, floating on your back like you raise stargazing from a summer lake, and realize you're looking at the ancient Egyptian night sky exactly as their sailors would have seen it from the deck of a rolling ship. A gentle swirl of warmer water spins you slowly, giving you the full 360-degree view. There's Orion, drawn as a striding figure with a belt of 3 bright stars. There's the Big Dipper, reimagined as the imperishable one circling the North Pole. And dominating everything is Sirius Sopdet in Egyptian, the brilliant dog star rendered twice as large as any other, trailing a faint comet-like streak of silver. Mainstream Egyptology has long known that the Hell-Yakau rising of Sirius marked the Nile flood and the New Year, one of the most reliable calendars in the ancient world. But up here on this underwater dome, it is clear the same star also guided men far out at sea, when the river was just a distant memory. You drift closer to one section of the wall where smaller panels show sailors at work under these very stars. Figures stand at the stern, holding crossed wooden rods to sight Polaris-like northern stars, while others consult simple clay tablets etched with star tables. A particularly charming vignette shows a captain waking a dozing helmsman with what looks like a gentle kick, complete with little ZZZ lines coming from the sleeper's head. Scholars love this kind of scene because it proves night sailing was routine, not accidental. But here's the quirky detail that makes you grin. Tucked in one corner is a tiny drawing of a sailor using a knotted rope to measure star altitude, while a curious cat balances on the rail beside him, paw outstretched like it's trying to help. Cats were sacred to Basti and common on ships as rat catchers, but apparently they also served as an official navigation assistance. The current rocks you gently, almost like a cradle. As you study the central constellation panel, Sirius gleams brightest, and radiating from it are faint lines connecting to horizon markers, rising and setting points for different seasons. This isn't just pretty decoration. It's a functional star chart for determining latitude and season at sea. Historians agree the Egyptians used circumpolar stars for basic north finding. But the real debate still simmering in academic circles is whether they ever developed true celestial navigation comparable to later Phoenician or Polynesian methods. Some experts point to texts describing star clocks and argue yes, they could find north and estimate direction reliably. Others counter that without instruments, like the astrolabe invented much later, they were limited to coastal pilot age and lucky guesses floating beneath this glowing dome. You can feel both sides. The sky looks vast and knowable, yet still mysteriously out of precise reach. A soft pulse of bioluminescence ripples across the ceiling, making the stars twinkle in sequence as if the library is animating a time-lapse of the night sky. You watch Orion stride across the dome, Sirius rise and set. The northern circumpolars wheel endlessly around the pole. It's hypnotic, slow, predictable. Eternal tiny fish dart between the inlaid stars like shooting meteors, adding their own improvisation to the show. One particularly bold angelfish pauses right in front of the Sirius stone, flaring its fins as if posing for a portrait with the brightest star in the sky. You let your body relax completely. Arms floating outward, legs loose, head tipped back. The water supports you perfectly, and the gentle spin of the current feels like the Earth's own rotation carrying you through the night. Down here, time loses its edges. You could watch these stars for hours and it would feel like minutes. The sailors who trusted them must have felt the same peace. On long voyages rocked by waves, guided by lights that never failed as long as clouds stayed away. Eventually, the glow shifts from cool silver to a warmer, rosier hue filtering in from a passage to your left. The current nudges you that way, reluctant but patient. As if hating to end the stargazing session, you roll lazily upright, giving the dome one last long look. Sirius seems to wink at you, steady, ancient, still keeping its appointments after 4,000 years ahead. The light promises something. Earth IR, a route carved through stone toward the mysterious Red Sea, where those star-guided ships actually ventured. Your eyelids feel pleasantly heavy now, thoughts soft and drifting like plankton. You let the water carry you toward the new glow, body sinking deeper into relaxation, mind still trailing stardust behind you. The rosy starlight from the celestial dome dims behind you as the current draws you into a long, sloping passage that feels like descending into the Earth's memory itself. The walls narrow, then widen again, and the water grows noticeably warmer, almost bath-like, carrying faint traces of mineral richness you associate with distant deserts and hidden springs. You drift downward in a gentle spiral, bubbles rising lazily past your ears, until the passage opens into a narrow canyon of stone lit by soft, reddish light filtering from far ahead. As you glide forward, the walls come alive with carved reliefs showing workers digging a massive canal under the watchful eyes of overseers and royal scribes. You pause to hover closer, tracing the scenes with your gaze. Teams of men swing bronze picks and haul baskets of earth, while others guide water from the Nile into the newly cut channel. At the center of the composition stands a pharaoh, likely Senusr, Edii, or perhaps one of the later are aimed sides, holding a ceremonial hoe, symbolically breaking ground. Mainstream history credits the Egyptians with early attempts to link the Nile to the Red Sea, beginning with a precursor canal in the Middle Kingdom that ran from the delta eastward through the Wadi Tum-Elati toward the Bitter Lakes. Parts of this Pharaoh-esque canal were navigable in seasons of high flood, allowing ships to bypass the long coastal route around the Sinai. You drift along the canyon wall, watching the project unfold scene by scene. One panel shows boats already floating in the finished section, loaded with goods and towed by teams on the banks. Another depicts engineers using simple leveling tools, basins filled with water connected by channels to keep the gradient shallow enough for navigation. It has impressive foresight, a waterway that could shave weeks off journeys to Punt and the incensed coasts. But here's the odd, almost comical detail that makes you smile. In several scenes, workers are shown pausing to wrestle with enormous catfish that apparently loved the new canal so much they kept swimming upstream into the construction zone. One particularly large fish is being hauled out by 4 men using ropes, its whiskers drawn longer than the workers' arms. Scholars think these were real Nile catfish that grew huge in slow water, but the artists clearly enjoyed exaggerating them into canal-clogging monsters. Further along, the reliefs shift to later eras. You spot inscriptions naming an Echoi of the 26th dynasty, who revived the project around 600 BC, and then Darius I the Persian, who finally completed a version deep enough for regular traffic. Tiny boats with Persian crews mingle with Egyptian ones, a reminder that this waterway dream outlasted dynasties. Yet the academic debate still swirls like sediment in the water. Was the original Middle Kingdom canal truly navigable by seagoing ships, or just a seasonal flood channel for smaller river craft? Some Egyptologists point to texts describing direct sailings to Punt via the eastern route and say, yes. Others argue the canal was too shallow and silt-prone until Persian engineering fixed it centuries later. Down here, carved in patient stone, the canal looks gloriously functional either way. The reddish glow intensifies ahead, and you round a bend to find the canyon opening into a vast submerged basin. At its center lies a perfect scale model of the ancient canal system, carved into the seafloor and inlaid with colored stone. Deep blue lapis for water, pale limestone for banks, red jasper for desert margins. Tiny model ships no bigger than your palm float in the channels, moved by invisible microcurrents that mimic the original flow. You descend slowly until you hovering just above the model, watching a miniature fleet glide from a carved Nile Delta port eastward toward a stylized Red Sea. It's mesmerizing, like a living diorama designed to run forever. A side branch of the model catches your eye, a narrower northern arm that once connected to the Mediterranean via the Palus-Ea Sea branch of the Nile for centuries. Ships could theoretically enter Egypt from either sea, making the delta a true crossroads. You follow one tiny cedar ship as it navigates the canal locks, simple basins with gates shown in raised and lowered positions. The ingenuity feels timeless. Control water levels, move boats through, repeat. No wonder later engineers from Ptolemy to Napoleon kept coming back to the same idea. Your body has settled into a profound stillness now, barely moving except for the slow rise and fall of your chest. The warm water cradles you like heated soap, and the gentle motion of the model ships lulls your thoughts into softer focus ahead. The basin floor slopes upward toward a golden archway framed by carved incense trees, the unmistakable gateway to Punt and its treasures. The canal has done its job. It has delivered you to the threshold of the exotic south. You let the current lift you toward that arch, heavy-limbed and deeply relaxed. The quiet engineering marvel fading behind you like a solved puzzle, no longer need to hold in your mind. The golden archway of incense trees parts for you like a curtain of soft fronds, and the current carries you into a chamber that feels less like a library hall and more like a treasure grove sunk to the bottom of a warm, dreaming sea. The water here is richer, almost syrupy, with suspended particles of gold leaf that catch the light and drift around you like slow-motion snow. You spread your arms and let them settle on your skin. Tiny flecks of ancient opulence that dissolve into nothing when you try to hold them. Before you stretches an open, circular space ringed by low stone platforms, each one heaped with representations of the legendary riches brought back from Punt. You glide from one to the next, weightless and wide-eyed. Piles of ebony logs, black, glossy, carved into miniature lengths, stacked neatly beside heaps of ivory tusks no longer than your forearm, yet perfectly detailed down to the growth rings. Beside them sit terracotta jars sealed with resin, their lids painted with labels: prime myrrh, frankincense grade 1, bdellium for temple use. Mainstream history celebrates these expeditions, especially the famous one under Queen Hatshepsut around 1470 BC, as triumphant proof that Egypt reached the Horn of Africa by sea, returning with living incense trees, panther skins, and electrum. The reliefs at Deir bear I show the ships so heavily laden they almost sink under the weight of luxury. But here, in this quiet underwater gallery, the sheer abundance feels intimate rather than triumphant. You drift over a low mound of what looks like pure gold, small ingots stamped with cartouches, rings, and delicate necklaces still threaded with carnelian and turquoise beads. Next to the gold sits a cluster of live animal models that make you pause and smile. 31 miniature baboons, yes, the exact number recorded in Hatshepsut's inscription, carved from limestone and painted with mischievous expressions, some holding dates, others scratching their heads. A pair of long-legged greyhounds lies curled asleep beside them, ribs delicately incised, as if exhausted from the long voyage home. The quirky detail that really gets you is tucked in one corner. A small pile of what appear to be dried throwing sticks, boomerang-like hunting tools the people of Punt use, stacked beside several live panthers on leashes, their spots painted with loving care. One panther has clearly escaped its handler and is shown playfully batting at a baboon's tail, while the handler looks on in comic despair, arms thrown up. Scholars think these animals were destined for royal menageries or sacred precincts, but the artist Couldn't resist capturing the chaos of unloading a ship full of exotic wildlife onto an Egyptian quay. You can almost hear the shouts, the barking, the indignant monkey chatter echoing across the water. Higher up on the walls, painted scenes show the moment of exchange. Egyptian sailors offering linen, beads, and axes to tall, dark-skinned Punditi chiefs wearing kilts of panther skin and elaborate headdresses in return. The chiefs present armfuls of incense resin that look like golden tears living where trees' roots, carefully balled in baskets, are loaded onto the ships. A botanical heist meant to transplant an entire industry to the Nile Valley. Historians still debate whether those trees actually survived and produced frankincense in Egypt, or if the climate proved too harsh and the experiment failed. Some point to later texts mentioning myrrh plant grown in Pharaoh's garden and say yes. Others insist it was wishful propaganda down here, surrounded by the evidence. The trees look hopeful and green, roots reaching toward an Egyptian sun they may never have seen. You linger longest over a central platform where two enormous electrum bowls overflow with what looks like cinnamon bark, ostrich eggs, and short swords of exotic design. A tiny label in hieroglyphs reads "Tribute freely given, not taken by force." A diplomatic boast Egypt loved to make nearby. A row of ebony logs is carved with notches, probably weight or quality marks, reminding you that all this wonder was also meticulous commerce. Someone counted every stick, weighed every grain of incense, argued over prices and gestures and broken phrases. A school of golden anthillas swims through the treasure piles, weaving between tusked and over baboon heads, as if this has always been their playground. One curious fish pauses to nibble at a painted date in a monkey's paw, then darts away when the stone refuses to yield. The absurdity makes you exhale a soft stream of bubbles that rises like laughter toward the distant ceiling. Your body feels deeply, deliciously heavy now, as though the weight of all this ancient wealth has settled gently onto your chest and limbs. The water rocks you in slow motion, gold flakes drifting across your vision like the final credits of a dream ahead. A softer light, pale rose and white, glows from the next passage, promising scenes of the queen who made this voyage famous. You let the current turn you that way, reluctant to leave the treasures, but trusting there's more wonder waiting. The baboons seem to wave goodbye with tiny stone paws, and you drift onward, mind full of incense and gold, body sinking deeper into the warm, quiet embrace of the sea. The golden snow of treasure flakes thins as the current lifts you out of the punt hoard and into a softly lit corridor painted in delicate rose and white. The water feels lighter here, almost effervescent, carrying the faint scent of lotus blossoms. That haven tea existed in these depths for millennia. You drift forward, body loose and heavy at the same time, until the passage opens into a grand, pillared hall dominated by one enormous wall relief that stretches from floor to distant ceiling like a private cinema screen built for a queen. You slow to a hover directly in front of it, letting the scene fill your vision. 5 magnificent ships sail in perfect formation across a stylized sea, their sails billowed out, prows cutting through painted waves teeming with fish. At the center of the lead vessel stands a regal figure under a white canopy, tall headdress with feathers and horns, slender arms raised in greeting to the people of Punt waiting on shore. This is Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh of the 18th dynasty around 1470 BC, one of the most successful rulers in Egyptian history and the mastermind behind the most famous maritime expedition to Punt ever recorded. Mainstream history celebrates her 5-ship fleet as a pinnacle of peaceful trade diplomacy, returning laden with wealth that helped fund her monumental building projects, including her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, where these very scenes were originally carved. You drift slowly along the relief, following the story panel by panel. The ships are rendered with loving detail. Double masts, intricate rigging, decks crowded with rowers in white kilts pulling in perfect unison on shore. The Queen's envoys, led by a portly official named Nihizwai, exchange gifts with the Puntati, king and queen, a famously quirky couple drawn with generous bellies and elaborate hairstyles. The Puntati queen, in particular, is shown with exaggerated features that scholars once misinterpreted as disease, but now understand as artistic convention for foreign abundance. Hatshepsut herself never left Egypt. She sent the fleet under trusted commanders while staying home to rule still. The relief proudly shows her receiving the tribute as if she sailed there personally. Classic royal propaganda, but undeniably effective. Here's the odd little detail that always makes modern viewers smile. Among the cargo being loaded onto the returning ships are 31 living trees, roots balled in massive baskets, being carried aboard by teams of straining sailors. The trees are drawn taller than the men, branches drooping comically over their heads like oversized umbrellas. One sailor has clearly lost his balance and is depicted tumbling backward into the water while clutching a branch complete with little splash lines. Scholars think this was the artist's gentle poke at the logistical nightmare of transporting live trees across the ocean. A botanical feat almost unheard of in the ancient world. The fact that they tried it all speaks volumes about Hatshepsut's ambition. You float upward to study the queen's figure more closely. She is shown in traditional male pharaonic pose, kilt, false beard, crook and flail to legitimize her rule in a world that preferred kings, yet subtle feminine touches remain. Narrower waist, softer facial lines, the elegant curve of her neck. Her cartouche appears everywhere, boldly proclaiming Ma et Kr. Her throne name meaning truth is the soul of the sun god. Historians still debate her motives for the pun voyage with the enthusiasm of a late-night podcast. Was it purely economic, securing direct access to incense, bypassing middlemen, or a grand statement of power to silence critics who questioned a woman on the throne? Some point to the lavish publicity this relief. Inscriptions, obelisks, and say it was political theater. Others highlight the practical wealth it generated and argue trade was the real driver. Down here, in the hush of the hall, both feel true. She was savvy enough to make one voyage serve many purposes. Tiny sea anemones have taken up residence along the carved sails, their tentacles waving like miniature flags in the microcurrent. A curious clownfish darts in and out of the queen's headdress feathers, treating the stone plumes as its personal anemone. The absurdity is perfect. 3,000 years later, the ocean has added its own crew to Hatshepsut's fleet. You linger longer than you planned, drifting back and forth along the vast relief, letting each panel unfold at its own pace. The ships sail forever toward home, never quite arriving. Treasures eternally balanced on deck. Your body has sunk into that deep, liquid relaxation where thoughts feel rounded at the edges and time stretches like taffy. The rose-white light softens further, shifting toward a warmer amber glow from the next passage somewhere ahead. The daily lives of the men who actually rowed those oars are waiting to be remembered. You let the current turn you gently in that direction. Heavy limb, mind full of lotus and quiet triumph. The queen's serene stone face watching you go with the faintest hint of an approving smile. The rose-white glow of Hatshepsut's grand fleet fades softly behind you as the current guides you into a cozier, lower sailing chamber that feels almost like the crew's mess on one of those long voyage ships. The walls are covered in intimate, lively vignettes of daily life at sea. Small scenes no bigger than a dinner plate, repeated in neat rows like a comic strip designed to keep homesick sailors entertained. You drift slowly along, eye level with the reliefs, letting the gentle sway of the water rock you from one panel to the next. The scenes are wonderfully ordinary in one. A row of oarsmen sit on deck during a break, passing around flat loaves of bread thick with garlic cloves. Historians know garlic was a staple ration for Egyptian workers and sailors alike, believed to ward off illness and give strength. Another panel shows a cook stirring a massive cauldron of lentil stew over a brazier, while a helper fans the coals with a palm frond. Mainstream records from Der El Medina and Ship Manifest confirm that sailors receive daily allotments of bread, beer, and vegetables, often more generous than land-based laborers. Got out here on the open water. Keeping the crew fed and happy was serious business. But the detail that makes you huff a quiet laugh into the water is the very next scene. Two sailors playing a heated game of S-E-net on a board scratched into the deck planks. Pieces fashioned from pebbles and shell fragments. One player has clearly just made a winning move. He is throwing his arms up in triumph while his opponent slumps dramatically, head in hands, as if his entire paycheck just vanished. S-E-net boards have been found on actual shipwrecks, and texts mention gambling debts settled in beer jars. Apparently, even on a months-long voyage to punt, Downtime meant board games and good-natured trash talk. A tiny cat sits watching the match from the rail, tail curled neatly around its paws, looking for all the world like it's judging both players equally. You float further along and find scenes of quieter moments. A sailor mending a torn sail with a bone needle as big as his forearm. Another shaving a friend's head with a copper razor while they share a jug of thick date beer. A third napping in the shade of a coiled rope, mouth open. Little ZZZ lines etched above his head. Beer was the lifeblood of these voyages. Water went stale fast, but lightly fermented beer stayed safe and provided calories. One panel even shows the ship's brewer straining a fresh batch through a sieve. Yeast sediment swirling like underwater snow. Scholars still debate exactly how strong that beer was. Some say mild and refreshing. Others insisted packed enough punch to explain the frequent sick leave notes in crew logs. Higher up, near the ceiling, the reliefs show hygiene routines that feel surprisingly modern. Sailors washing clothes by trailing them overboard on ropes, or rinsing their mouths with natron solution for fresh breath. One endearing vignette depicts a young deckhand struggling to wring out a kilt, while an older sailor demonstrates the proper twist technique, complete with exaggerated facial expressions that scream "you Ray doing it wrong." Hit it as such a universal mentor-mentee moment that time and depth can detouch it. A soft amber light begins to pulse from a side alcove, drawing you closer. Inside, a single large panel shows the crew gathered on deck at night, some pointing at stars, others strumming simple harps or clapping rhythms on tambourines. Music and storytelling were essential for morale on long nights. Text mentions songs about the Nile, lost loves, and heroic pharaohs. A quirky touch. One musician is drawn with his harp upside down, strings facing the wrong way, while his bandmates glance at him with barely concealed smirks. Even back then, somebody always showed up to rehearsal without tuning properly. You linger in the alcove longest, hovering in the middle of the imagined circle of sailors. The water here is warmer, almost body temperature, and the gentle current rocks you like a hammock strung between masts. You can almost taste the garlic bread, hear the click of net pieces, feel the sun on deck. Even though you ray fathoms deep, these men weren't just nameless oars in royal propaganda. They ate, joked, gambled, griped about the cook, and missed home just like anyone stuck on a long deployment today. Your eyelids are heavy now, thoughts soft and rounded. The scenes of daily life blur gently at the edges as the current turns you toward a new passage where cooler water and a faint wind-like murmur promise the drama of storms ahead. You let yourself be carried that way, body loose, mind full of beer foam and distant laughter. The sailors' quiet routines wrapping around you like a warm blanket on a calm night watch. The amber warmth of the crew's daily life lingers like the aftertaste of shared beer as the current pulls you onward. Cooler now, carrying a faint murmur that grows into the low, rhythmic whoosh of wind across open water. You drift into a wide, vaulted chamber where the walls curve outward like the belly of a swelling wave, and the seafloor drops away into shadowed depths. The water shifts restlessly around you, rocking your body in slow, deliberate swells that feel almost like breathing. Before you, the walls come alive with dramatic reliefs of ships caught in storm, massive waves carved with sharp, frothy crest tower over the vessels, curling like angry cobras ready to strike. Sails are furled in panic, oars pulled in, crews huddled under makeshift awnings while lightning forks across a sky painted in angry ochre and black. You float closer, letting the current match the rhythm of the depicted chaos, and recognize these as scenes of Mediterranean and Red Sea storms that Egyptian sailors dreaded. Mainstream texts like the tale of the shipwrecked sailor and When Amon's report described sudden gales that could scatter fleets or drive ships onto rocky coast. Survival depended on quick seamanship and, just as importantly, divine favor. One large central panel shows a ship riding out the worst of it. The crew pours libations overboard from tall jars. Arms raised in plea to the sea itself. Historians know Egyptians didn't have a major sea god like Poseidon. Instead, they appealed to a patchwork of deities: Seth for storms, Hapi for waters, or even Hathor as mistress of distant lands. But here's the quirky, utterly charming detail that makes you smile even in the simulated turmoil. Several sailors are scattering fresh lettuce leaves onto the waves as offerings. Yes, lettuce scholars have puzzled over this for decades. But it turns out a particular type of prickly lettuce was sacred to the Ethiopic god Min, associated with fertility and stormy virility apparently. Sailors believe floating crisp greens would calm aroused sea forces. Imagine the deckhand whose job it was to guard the salad crate during a gale. Priority cargo. No bruising allowed. You drift along the lower register where smaller scenes show storm aftermath. Crews bailing water with buckets chained together in assembly line fashion. Others repairing torn rigging with spare cordage. A few simply lying flat on deck staring at clearing skies in exhausted relief. One panel depicts a captain embracing his helmsman after safe landfall. Both men's faces etched with the universal expression of "we are never doing that again until next season." Another odd touch. A ship's cat clings to the mast with all claws out. Fur puffed to twice its size. Eyes wide as dinner plates clearly. Not even sacred rat catchers enjoyed rough weather. Higher up, the reliefs shift to protective measures taken before sailing. Sailors tie amulets around their necks. Scarabs. Wedge eyes. Tiny hippopotamus figurines of Tret for safe passage. One vignette shows a priest on deck reciting from a papyrus scroll while crew members hold up model ears. Symbolic pleas for the gods to hear their prayers. Academics still debate how much of Egyptian seafaring success relied on practical skill versus magical insurance. Some point to the sophisticated hull designs and star navigation we've already seen and say seamanship was key. Others highlight the sheer volume of protective spells found on papyri and argue that no Egyptian skipper left port without both oars and incantations. Down here, rocked gently by the library's simulated swell, you feel the truth is probably a relieved mixture of both. A soft bioluminescent glow begins to pulse from cracks in the waves, as if lightning frozen mid-flash. Tiny shrimp dart through the carved foam like living sparks, adding flickers of real light to the ancient drama. The current rocks you harder for a moment, just enough to remind your body of the power these men face, then eases into a soothing lull as the storm scenes give way to calmer waters ahead. Your limbs are heavy now, sinking into the water's embrace as though the storm has spent its fury on you too, leaving only deep post-adrenaline calm. The cooler water feels refreshing against your skin, and the rhythmic swell has become a cradle rather than a threat ahead. A single massive shape looms in the dimness, a fallen obelisk half buried in the sand, its inscriptions glowing faintly. The ocean has one more quiet mystery to share before letting you rest. You let the current carry you toward it, body loose, breath slow, the echo of wind and waves fading into the soft hush that always follows a storm. The rhythmic swell of the storm chamber eases behind you as the current carries you into a quieter, dimly lit grotto where the water feels thick and reverent. You drift downward, drawn toward a single colossal shape half buried in the pale sand. A massive granite obelisk, fallen on its side like a toppled giant. It is easily 60 feet long. Its surface is still sharp despite the gentle polishing of centuries underwater. Soft spotlights of bioluminescence play across the inscriptions, making the carved hieroglyphs glow in sequences, as if the stone itself is slowly reading its own story to you. You circle the obelisk slowly, letting your fingertips brush the cool granite. The main text is a dedication from a new kingdom pharaoh, likely Seti I or Ramesses II, boasting of erecting twin obelisks before a great temple to celebrate victories and divine favor. Historians know these needle-like monuments were quarried at Aswan, floated down the Nile on massive barges during flood season, then raised with ropes, levers, and sheer manpower. Many still stand in Egypt or were later carted off to Rome, Paris, London, New York, but this one never made it to its pedestal. Lower down the shaft, deeper inscriptions tell the unhappy sequel. A detailed account of the sea voyage that went wrong. The reliefs show the obelisk lashed horizontally across two enormous cedar barges joined by a platform, towed by a fleet of rowing galleys. Waves or calm at first, crews confident, then come panels of increasing tension, snap tow lines, shifting cargo. A sudden squall. The final scene depicts the moment of disaster. The obelisk rolling off its cradle, plunging into the sea while tiny figures on deck throw up their arms in dismay. Mainstream archaeology has documented similar mishaps. One famous unfinished obelisk still lies in the Aswan quarry, cracked and abandoned. But sunken ones are rarer. This appears to be a record of an actual maritime accident during transport to a coastal temple, perhaps by Belos or a delta sanctuary. The quirky detail that makes you exhale a soft, amused bubble is carved near the base. A small vignette of the project overseer, a portly official with a scroll, standing on shore after the loss, one hand on hip, the other pointing accusingly at a very sheepish-looking hippopotamus swimming away in the background. Scholars think hippos occasionally attack river barges, but out at sea, probably not. More likely it's the artist's tongue-in-cheek way of saying something big and unexpected messed this up, or perhaps blaming the chaotic god Seth in hippo form. Either way, it's ancient Egypt's version of filing an insurance claim under act of angry river horse. You float along the broken tip where the pyramid eye and the gold-capped top lies, separated a few feet away, still gleaming faintly. Inscriptions here list the craftsman's names and a plea to Ammon for safe delivery that clearly went unheard this time. Academics still debate the exact route and method for sea transport of such massive stones. Some argue the obelisks were shipped upright on reinforced ships. Others insist horizontal lashing between twin hulls was safer. A few even suggest this very wreck could be the famous lost obelisk of Ramesses I mentioned in fragmented texts, intended for a temple at Tanis or Pi-Ramses, but never arrived down here. Half buried and silent, it keeps its secrets close. Tiny garden eels poke their heads from the sand around the base, swaying like curious spectators at a fallen monument. A large grouper has made its home in the shadow of the shaft, blinking slowly as you pass. The whole scene feels less tragic than peaceful. This giant needle meant to pierce the sky now rests horizontally, pointing nowhere in particular. Claimed by the sea it tried to cross. Your body has settled into an even deeper stillness. The weight of the obelisk somehow mirrored in your own pleasant heaviness. The water temperature is perfectly neutral, neither warm nor cool, just there, holding you. The current circles once more, slow and respectful, before guiding you toward a faint cluster of lights in the distance, remnants of ancient harbors, preserved in miniature. The fallen monument seems to nod as you leave, a quiet reminder that even Pharaoh's grandest plans sometimes end up gently, irrevocably. On the seafloor you drift onward, mind soft, breath slow, the stone's unfinished journey fading behind you like a story that chose its own ending. The faint glow of the fallen obelisk recedes into shadow as the current lifts you gently upward, guiding you into a wide, shallow basin that feels like stepping onto an ancient waterfront preserved in perfect stillness. The seafloor here is paved with smooth limestone slabs, forming a vast model of a long-lost harbor complex. Tiny stone quays jut out into inlaid blue channels, and miniature warehouses line the shore in neat rows. You drift low almost skimming the mosaic. As microcurrents animate the scene, model ships glide in and out of berths, guided by invisible tides. The central port is unmistakably Egyptian reed boats and cedar galleys cluster around a delta-style lighthouse carved with Pharaoh-esque cartouche, but as you circle outward, foreign elements appear docked alongside our vessels with high, curved stems typical of Minoan Crete, and others with horse-head prows that scream Aegean trader. Piles of miniature cargo litter the quays. Egyptian grain jars next to Cypriot copper ingots. Mycenaean stirrup jars beside bundles of Lebanese timber. Mainstream archaeology confirms that Eastern Mediterranean ports like Byblos, Ugret, and the Egyptian outpost of Peru served as bustling trade hubs during the Late Bronze Age. Roughly 1600 c. 1200 BC goods flowed in every direction. Egypt exported grain, papyrus, and gold, imported timber, copper, tin, olive oil, and luxury pottery. You glide along a row of tiny warehouses, each with open doors revealing stacked amphorae and sacks. One building is labeled with hieroglyphs for House of Syrian Wine, another for Cretan oil. The detail that makes you smile is tucked beside a key. A miniature Egyptian customs official, portly, scroll in hand, standing next to a very confused-looking donkey loaded with oversized Mycenaean pots that clearly won't fit through the door. The donkey's ears are laid back in classic not my problem fashion. While the official scratches his head, scholars have found actual clay seals and dockets from these ports recording similar bureaucratic headaches: wrong sizes, damaged goods, arguments over tariffs. Trade was lucrative, but never drama-free. Further out, you spot a separate enclave of quays with distinctly non-Egyptian architecture. Rounded buildings and bull-leaping fresco fragments inlaid in the walls. This must represent the Egyptian trading post on Crete or the Minoan merchants' quarter in the Delta. Wall scenes show Egyptian sailors bartering with men in colorful loincloths, exchanging linen for painted pottery. One charming vignette depicts two traders, one Egyptian, one Cretan, sharing a drink from the same cup, arms around each other's shoulders in obvious friendship. Another shows a Cretan acrobat performing a bull leap for amused Egyptian dockworkers, who clap politely while looking mildly terrified. These peaceful exchanges are backed by finds like Egyptian scarabs in Knossos and Minoan pottery in Avaris. The academic debate drifts through your mind like silt. Who dominated this trade network? Some scholars argue Egypt was the senior partner, using its grain surplus to dictate terms. Others point to the sophisticated distribution of Mycenaean and Minoan goods across the Levant, and insist the Aegean cultures were the true middlemen, connecting Egypt to Europe. Down here, surrounded by the miniature evidence, it looks more like a cooperative web, everyone benefiting, everyone complaining about late shipments. A cluster of glowing jellyfish hovers above the model like living lanterns over an ancient night market. Tiny shrimp dart between the miniature ships, playing the role of harbor fish waiting for scraps. You descend until you ray floating just above the central quay, watching a tiny cedar galley unload its cargo of copper oxhide ingots, those distinctive for-handled slabs that have been found from Sardinia to the Nile. The scale is perfect. The ingots look heavy even in miniature, and the dock workers strain comically under their weight. Your body feels completely supported now, the water cradling every limb as though you've become part of the harbor itself. The gentle motion of the model ships has sensed with your breath. Slow in, slow out. The light here is soft gold, like late afternoon sun on old stone. Ahead, a narrow channel leads toward brighter frescoes in vivid Minoan-style dolphins, octopuses, flowing lines. The library is ready to show you the deeper cultural connections that grew out of all this trade. You let the current carry you that way, heavy and relaxed, The quiet bustle of the ancient port fading behind you like a marketplace closing for the night. Vendors packing up. Sailors heading to taverns that no longer exist, leaving only the hush of water and memory. The golden harbor lights dim behind you as the current draws you through the narrow channel into a vibrant, flowing chamber where the walls seem to dance with life. The water here is clearer, almost sparkling, and the colors on every surface are impossibly fresh. Deep ultramarine, vivid crimson, sunny yellow, and swirling patterns that move with your gaze. You realize you've entered a space dedicated to Minoan influence or perhaps mutual admiration, because the style has shifted dramatically from rigid Egyptian grids to the joyful, curving lines of Crete. Massive fresco fragments cover the walls, reconstructed in perfect detail. Leaping dolphins arc over stylized waves. Octopuses coil their tentacles around painted rocks, and graceful figures in tight belts and flounced skirts pour libations or gather saffron. You drift slowly along one long panel showing a seaside town, perhaps Akroti or Knossos, with multi-story buildings, open balconies, and women waving from windows as ships arrive below. Mainstream archaeology has long celebrated the close ties between Minoan Crete and New Kingdom, Egypt. Egyptian scarabs and stone vessels turn up in Cretan palaces, while Minoan pottery and fresco styles appear in the Delta palaces of pharaohs like Thutmose III and Amenhotep III. Trade wasn't just goods. It was ideas, art, passion. You pause before a particularly lively scene. A delegation of Minoan sailors, bare-chested, long-haired, wearing colorful codpieces, greeting Egyptian officials on a quay. Both groups raise hands in mirrored gestures of peace, while porters carry goods back and forth. One Minoan offers a magnificent ride-on shaped like a bull's head. An Egyptian responds with a delicate alabaster jar. The exchange looks genuinely warm, almost festive, but here's the quirky detail that makes you chuckle softly. In the background, a Cretan sailor is trying to demonstrate bull leaping to a group of wide-eyed Egyptian soldiers mid-vault over a charging bull painted with impressive horns, while the Egyptians back away in clear alarm, hands up as if to say no thank you. We stick to chariots. Scholars love this cultural mismatch. Egyptians admired Minoan art but found their athletics utterly baffling. Higher up, another fresco shows Egyptian ships in a Minoan harbor, their square sails contrasting with the Cretan vessels' curving prows. Dolphins leap alongside both, as if escorting friends. Wall paintings like these have been found at Avaris modern Tel El Dabei, the Hyksos-era capital turned New Kingdom palace, where Minoan-style frescoes cover entire rooms complete with labyrinth patterns and flying fish. Historians still hotly debate the direction of influence. Did Minoan artists travel to Egypt and paint these walls themselves, training local craftsmen? Or did Egyptian artists visit Crete, absorb the style, and bring it home? Some point to technical details like the use of true fresco technique, pigment on wet plaster, and argue Cretan masters on site. Others highlight Egyptian motifs mixed in and insist it was enthusiastic imitation. Down here, surrounded by the flowing lines, it feels like a joyful conversation where both sides borrowed shamelessly and no one kept score. You drift to the center of the chamber where a low stone table holds reconstructed artifacts side by side. A Minoan Khmer-ware cup with swirling white-on-black designs next to an Egyptian faience hippopotamus figurine. A Cretan seal stone engraved with a griffin beside an Egyptian scarab bearing Amenhotep III's name. They sit together as if they always belonged that way nearby. A painted scene shows women from both cultures comparing jewelry. Minoan ladies with elaborate necklaces and bare breasts. Egyptian women in sheer linen dresses and heavy wigs, each pointing admiringly at the other's style. Fashion diplomacy at its finest. A gentle school of damn selfish weaves through the fresco dolphins. Following the painted arcs, as if joining an eternal game, one bold fish pauses in front of an octopus tentacle, flaring its fins in mimicry before darting away. The living and the ancient move together in perfect harmony. Colors bright, lines flowing, no borders or barriers. Your body has become part of the current now, loose and heavy. Thoughts soft as sea foam. The vibrant chamber feels like a celebration that never needed to end ahead. The light shifts to a sterner red and gold military hues, promising scenes of conflict on the same waters that once carried friendly trade. You let the water turn you slowly toward that passage, reluctant to leave the dolphins and the laughter, but trusting the library's rhythm. The Minoan waves seem to wave goodbye, and you drift onward, mind full of saffron and salt, body sinking deeper into the warm, weightless quiet. The flowing Minoan colors soften and fade as the current guides you out of the dolphin chamber and into a starkly dramatic hall bathed in deep red and gold light. The water here feels heavier, charged with tension, and the walls rise straight and tall like the sides of war galleys locked in battle. You drift forward slowly, body swaying with a new, purposeful rhythm, until the full scene unfolds before you. An enormous panoramic relief of the greatest naval battle in ancient Egyptian record, the defeat of the mysterious sea peoples under Ramesses III around 1177 BC. The wall is alive with motion, frozen in stone. Egyptian ships ram invaders at full speed. Arrows arc through the air like swift birds, and hand-to-hand combat rages on decks cluttered with shields and spears at the center. Ramesses III stands on his flagship in classic smiting pose, mace raised, grasping a handful of enemy hair while his fleet surrounds the chaotic vessels of the sea peoples. Mainstream history draws heavily from the detailed inscriptions at Medine et Habu, depicting this battle as a pivotal moment that halted migration sweeping the Bronze Age Mediterranean and saved Egypt from collapse. The invaders, identified as Pele Set, Shurdin, Shekelesh, and others, arrive in distinctive ships with bird head prows and feathered helmets. You glide closer to study the Egyptian tactics. Their galleys are shown with high castles fore and aft, packed with archers and marines, while rowers below pull in perfect synchronization. One devastating maneuver stands out. Egyptian ships grapple enemy vessels with hooked poles, then board in overwhelming numbers, but the quirky detail that always raises eyebrows and quiet chuckles is the repeated depiction of a small crow's nest high on the Egyptian mass, occupied by a single archer raining arrows down from above. Scholars call this the earliest known use of topmen in naval warfare, a tactical edge borrowed perhaps from Syrian allies. It is oddly modern, like putting a sniper in a tree during an ancient sea fight. One archer is even drawn waving triumphantly after hitting his mark, while the enemy below looks up in comic dismay. Lower panels show the sea people's ships in disarray. Some capsized, others captured, prisoners bound and marched before the pharaoh. Women and children in ox carts on shore suggest this was a full migration, not just raid. The invaders' distinctive horned helmets and round shields contrast sharply with Egyptian kilts and kite shields. Historians still debate the origins and motives fiercely. Were these desperate refugees fleeing drought and collapse elsewhere, or organized conquerors? Some link them to the fall of Mycenaean Greece and Hittite Empire, arguing climate change and systemic failure drove mass movement. Others see coordinated aggression. Down here, carved in triumphant stone, they look both formidable and tragically outmatched. You drift along a side wall showing preparation scenes, shipwrights reinforcing hulls with extra beams, archers practicing on floating targets, priests blessing oars with incense. One enduring vignette depicts a lion, Ramesses III's personal mascot, pacing the deck of the royal flagship, roaring at the enemy while sailors pat its head for luck. Lions were sometimes kept aboard as psychological weapons. The enemy supposedly panicked at the roar, whether it worked or just made the crew feel braver. The artist clearly enjoyed drawing the big cat looking smug. Tiny flashes of bioluminescence streak across the battle like lingering arrows. And a large ray glides beneath the relief, its wings mimicking the shape of overturned enemy hulls. The red gold light pulses slowly, matching the imagined beat of war drums. Long silent, the chaos is vivid, yet strangely distant, preserved in perfect order. No blood, no screams, just the quiet drama of survival. Your body has absorbed the tension and released it again, leaving you heavier, more deeply relaxed than before. The water rocks you in slow victory rolls, as though the flagship itself is carrying you home ahead. The light cools to a soft turquoise, promising something gentler, words of protection rather than weapons. You let the current turn you that way, limbs loose, breath steady. The clash of oars and shields fading into memory as the library prepares to whisper spells instead of war cries. The red gold echoes of battle fade as the current carries you into a small, dimly lit alcove that feels like the private cabin of a cautious sailor. The water here is calm and cool, almost hushed, and the walls are lined with row upon row of thin papyrus sheets sealed in transparent coatings, each one no larger than a modern postcard. You drift closer, letting the gentle flow position you right in front of the nearest shelf, and realize these are personal spell collections, magical insurance policies carried aboard ship. The sheets are covered in neatly inked hieroglyphs, incantations, protective formulas. Pleas to gods and demons alike. You hover over one scroll that lists standard prayers to Ammon for fair winds, to Thoth for clear navigation, and to Tiaret for safe return of mothers and children left at home. Mainstream Egyptology has cataloged hundreds of such magical papyri, practical handbooks blending religion, medicine, and superstition that sailors and soldiers carried like modern good luck charms. Amulets and spells were as essential as oars. But the quirky spell that makes you exhale a stream of amused bubbles is written in bold, larger letters on several sheets. A dedicated incantation to prevent crocodiles from leaping aboard the ship while at sea. Yes, crocodiles. The text describes Sobek, the crocodile god, being politely but firmly asked to keep his children in the river and away from saltwater decks. One version even includes a little drawing of a very confused croc halfway up a ship's side, mouth open in surprise as the spell repels it backward into the waves. Scholars think this reflects lingering Nile anxieties carried to sea. Croc attacks were a real river danger, and sailors apparently weren't taking chances even hundreds of miles offshore. It's the ancient equivalent of carrying bear spray on a cruise ship. You drift along the shelves, reading more. There are spells for calming storms, complete with instructions to recite while pouring beer overboard. For healing seasickness, vomit into a bowl and name it after set. For protecting cargo from rats. And for ensuring the cook doesn't burn the bread. One practical favorite offers a charm against leaky hulls. Tie a red thread around a wed Jadi amulet and hang it from the mast. Another sheet lists dream interpretations for sailors. If you dream of a tall lighthouse, safe landfall soon. If you dream of a hippo chasing you, check the bilge for leaks immediately. Academics still debate how literally these spells were taken. Some argue they were psychological comfort, placebo magic for men facing unpredictable seas. Others point to the sheer volume and detail of surviving texts and insist genuine belief in their power shaped every voyage. No captain, they say, would sail without a priest or at least a literate crewman who could read the right words at the right moment. Down here, surrounded by the quiet collection, it feels like both are true. Faith and fear braided together into waterproof papyrus. You linger over a final shelf of tiny amulets displayed beside their matching spells. Fiance fish for abundant catches. Scarabs for rebirth after near drowning. Miniature anchors carved from hippopotamus ivory for stability. One odd little pendant stands out. A perfectly carved lettuce leaf in green stone. Tied to the anti-storm offering you saw earlier. Someone really believed in the power of greens. A soft turquoise glow begins to seep from the far wall, revealing a heavy bronze door sealed with massive hinges. The current circles you once, slow and affectionate, as if making sure you've absorbed every word of protection. Your body is profoundly heavy now. Muscles dissolved into the water. Thoughts drifting like loose pages. The spells seem to settle over you like an invisible cloak. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet reassurance that ancient sailors carried with them into the dark ahead. The bronze door waits, promising the deepest vault of all. You let the water nudge you toward it, eyelids drooping, breath soft. The whispered words of long ago mariners following you like gentle companions into whatever forbidden knowledge lies beyond. The turquoise glow from the alcove of spells intensifies as the current presses you gently against the massive bronze door. It swings inward without a sound, ancient hinges moving as smoothly as the day they were forged, and you glide through into the heart of the library. The space beyond is vast and circular. A perfect vault sunk deep beneath layers of sea and time. The water here is perfectly still, almost reverent, and the light comes from nowhere and everywhere. A soft, diffused emerald that makes everything feel suspended in a dream you are not quite ready to wake from. In the center of the chamber rises a ring of tall, sealed bronze jars, dozens of them standing on low stone pedestals, like silent guardians. Each one is taller than you. Their surfaces etched with protective cartridges and bound with thick cords sealed in wax. You drift slowly around the circle, letting your fingers trail just above the metal. These aren't ordinary storage vessels. They are time capsules, the deepest archive of the underwater library. Mainstream Egyptology has long whispered about forbidden or secret texts hidden by priests to protect dangerous knowledge from invaders or unworthy eyes. Rumors, fueled by references in later Greek and Roman writers to Egyptian mysteries sunk beneath the waves. Here, preserved in perfect silence, they wait. You pause before one jar whose lid bears a prominent symbol, a sunken landmass surrounded by concentric waves, with tiny ships fleeing toward the horizon. The inscription beside it mentions the land that was swallowed when the sea rose in anger. Scholars know Egyptian priests recorded cataclysmic events, including echoes of the Thera eruption around 1600 BC that devastated Minoan Crete and sent tsunamis across the delta. But these jars go deeper, literally into stories most academics file under mythology. A smaller panel on the same jar shows a delegation of Egyptian sages receiving scrolls from tall, fair-skinned figures in strange robes. Under a sky dominated by an enormous star or comet, the exchange looks solemn, almost fearful. The quirky detail that makes you smile softly is tucked in the lower corner. One Egyptian priest, clearly overwhelmed, has dropped his scroll and is staring wide-eyed at a foreign visitor's pet, a tiny monkey wearing a little hat, perched on the man's shoulder and offering a date as if to say, cheer up. It's not that bad even in moments of cosmic revelation. Someone couldn't resist adding comic relief. You circle to another jar labeled with the Aden disc and Akhen Aden's cartouches. Heretical sun worship, briefly appended Egyptian religion in the 14th century BC. The reliefs here show priests hastily sealing texts during the restoration after his death. When traditionalists purged Amarna and its dangerous ideas, some jars bear warnings for the eyes of the initiated only. Lest chaos return, historians still debate whether Akhen Aden's monotheism influenced later faiths or was simply a political power play gone wrong. Down here, The sealed jars suggest his followers believed the knowledge was too potent to destroy. They chose burial instead. Further along, you find jars dedicated to star lore far older than the celestial dome you visited earlier. Records of a time before the flood when the sky was different. Constellations shifted. Great teachers arrived from drowned lands. One panel depicts a massive wave overwhelming a city of step pyramids not unlike Egypt's own, while priests on boats rescue scrolls and sacred objects. The academic world argues endlessly over whether these are garbled memories of real prehistoric catastrophe, sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age, perhaps, or purely symbolic myths warning against hubris. Preserved in bronze at the bottom of the sea, they feel less like metaphor and more like witness statements. A gentle pulse of warmer water rises from the floor, carrying you upwards so you can see the vault from above. The jars form a perfect spiral, like the heart of a nautilus shell. And at the very center lies a single empty pedestal, as if waiting for one final secret that was never quite sealed away. Tiny particles of ancient gold leaf drift around the ring, catching the emerald light like slow fireflies. You linger in the stillness longer than anywhere else, body completely weightless, breath so slow you barely notice it. The vault feels like the quietest place on earth. No. Beneath it, whatever forbidden knowledge rests in those jars. It has content to stay hidden a little longer, sharing only whispers through the stone. The ocean has guarded it well. Eventually, the current returns, soft, patient, almost apologetic, as it begins to guide you toward a distant archway where faint outlines of the library's earlier halls shimmer like memories. The deepest archive has shown you its heart, and now it has time to surface. Slowly, gently, carrying only what you can hold. In a dream you let the water carry you outward, heavy-limbed and deeply at peace. The bronze jars standing silent behind you, keeping their final secrets for another night, another dreamer. The emerald stillness of the deep vault lingers around you like a held breath as the current finally stirs again, soft and reluctant, coaxing you away from the silent bronze jars. You drift outward through the heavy door, which closes behind you with the gentlest sigh. Sealing the forbidden archive once more, the water lightens almost imperceptibly, shifting from deep emerald to a hazy indigo shot through with silver threads, as if the library itself is exhaling memories it has kept too long. You glide into a long, tapering gallery where the walls are no longer covered in sharp reliefs or bright frescoes, but in faint, almost ghostly impressions, shadowy outlines of the places you've visited, as though the stone is dreaming them back to you. Ships under starlight, incense trees swaying, lettuce leaves floating on stormy waves, a fallen obelisk, a queen's serene face, all flicker past in soft focus, overlapping and dissolving like reflections on rippled water. The whispers begin here, not as words, but as feelings. The salt tang of a distant shore, the creak of cedar planks, the hush of papyrus unrolling, the low laughter of sailors sharing garlic bread under a quiet sky. One shadow lingers longer than the rest, a vast, indistinct landmass ringed by waves, its cities stepping down to the sea in terraces of light. Priests stand on the shore, arms raised, scrolls pressed to their chests as the water rises, not in anger, but in inevitable sorrow. You feel the weight of their knowledge, the urgency to save what can be saved. Mainstream scholars have chased echoes of this story through Plato's Tales of Atlantis, through Egyptian records of Kftu and lost western lands, through geological traces of flooded prehistoric coastlines. Some insist it as pure myth, a moral fable about hubris. Others quietly note how many ancient cultures share versions of a great flood that swallowed an advanced civilization, and wonder if fragmented memory outlived the land itself. The quirky whisper that drifts past next makes you smile in your half-dream. The faint image of that little hatted monkey from the bronze jar, still cheerfully offering a date to a worried priest, as if reminding everyone that even at the end of the world, someone packed snacks. It as a gentle nudge. Dante take the mystery to solemnly. Humanity has always found room for small absurdities amid the grand tragedies. You float through the gallery slowly, letting each fading outline brush against your mind like seaweed. The storm you rode out, the stars you sailed by, the treasures you marveled at, they all blurred together now, not losing detail, but softening into a single, warm impression. Historians still argue over which parts were real voyages and which were exaggerated propaganda, whether the sunken texts describe actual events or priestly allegory. Down here, in the dissolving echoes, the distinction feels unimportant. The stories were true enough to be preserved this carefully, true enough to guide real ships through real dangers, true enough to comfort generations of sailors staring at an endless horizon. The current grows warmer, almost body temperature, and the gallery widens into a space with no clear walls, just deepening blue fading upward into silver. The whispers quiet, replaced by the soft, familiar hum of open ocean. Tiny plankton drift past like fading sparks, carrying away the last fragments of inscription and image. You feel the library releasing you, not abruptly, but the way a good dream lets you go when morning is near, gradually, gratefully, with no need for goodbyes. Your body is heavier than it has ever been tonight, every limb sinking willingly into the water as embraced thoughts come slowly, rounded and gentle. The secrets of ancient Egypt as oceans trade routes, storms, stars, spells, triumphs, losses settle over you like a light blanket of sand. There is nothing left to discover, nothing left to prove, only the quiet certainty that you've been exactly where you needed to be. Ahead, the silver shimmer of the surface glimmers far away. Patient and unhurried, the current lifts you toward it, slow as moonlight on waves. The library's final gift is this peaceful ascent, carrying you home with all its stories tucked safely in the softest corners of your mind, ready to dissolve into dreams. The silver shimmer of the surface is still far above, but the library's whispers have quieted entirely now, leaving only the soft, familiar push of the current and the slow rise and fall of your own breath. You are drifting upward through open water, no walls, no reliefs, just endless indigo fading to deeper blue, speckled with tiny drifting lights that might be plankton or might be the last sparks of ancient stories letting go. The ocean has taken back its own, and all that remains is the gentle motion carrying you home. Your body feels different now, heavier in the most comforting way, as though the weight of every scroll, every carved ship, every whispered spell has settled into your bones like warm sand. The memories Dante fight for space. They simply layer themselves, one over the other, until the Nile and the Mediterranean feel like the same river running through the same quiet dream. You sense the cedar scent again, faint and sweet, mingling with lotus and distant incense, then fading into clean salt. The stars you sailed under blink once more behind your eyes, Sirius brightest of all, before dissolving into the soft gray of pre-dawn. No effort is required, the current does everything, rocking you in long, slow sweeps that match the rhythm of deep sleep. Your arms float outward, palms up, fingers loosely curled, legs trail behind, relaxed and forgotten. Even your head tips back slightly, neck supported perfectly, as though invisible hands are cradling you for the final stretch. Thoughts come and go like passing fish, a giraffe ducking to board a ship, a cat balancing on a rail during a storm, a fallen obelisk resting peacefully on the sand, a queen's serene stone smile. Each image surfaces, lingers just long enough to feel familiar, then slips away without regret. The water grows warmer by degrees, almost imperceptibly, until it matches the temperature under your blankets. Back in the real world, you feel the boundary approaching, not a sharp line, but a gradual softening where dream and waking begin to overlap. The ocean as hum deepens into the quiet hush of your own room, the distant creak of old wood, the faint tick of a clock you no longer notice in daylight. The library has done its work. It has shown you everything it wanted to share, and now it is content to let you carry the stories upward in silence. A single bubble rises from your lips, slow, perfect, silver, and pops soundlessly far above. With it goes the last trace of salt on your tongue, the last echo of waves against cedar hulls. What remains is only warmth, softness, the gentle pull of gravity remembering you. The Nile's flood and the sea's tide merge into one slow heartbeat. Pharaoh's dreams, sailors' laughter, priests' careful secrets all settle into the quiet space behind your eyes, ready to become the dreams that will visit tonight. You are almost there now. The silver shimmer is closer, softer, more like moonlight on sheets than actual surface light. Your body knows the way home without needing direction. Eyelids that have been heavy for hours grow heavier still, not with effort, but with permission. The current gives one final affectionate nudge, more caress than push, and then releases you entirely, trusting you to finish the journey on your own. Everything is quiet, everything is safe. The ocean, the library, the ancient world, they all recede with tenderness, leaving only the warm, waiting dark of sleep. You feel yourself sinking not downward, but inward into the familiar embrace of pillow and blanket, the faint scent of your own sheets, the subtle weight of covers pulled just right. The last whisper is barely a breath. Thank you for visiting. Come back when the waves call again. And then there is only softness, and rest, and the long, unhurried night stretching out like an endless, gentle sea. The warmth you've carried from the depths is still wrapped around you like the softest blanket as the current slows to almost nothing, letting you hover in a vast, open expanse of pale, shimmering blue. There is no up or down here, only gentle light filtering from every direction, as though the sea itself has decided to cradle you in its palm one last time before letting go. The library is behind you now, its halls and whispers folded away like a book closed with care. What remains is only the quiet journey home. You feel every story you've touched tonight settling into place, the great stone door half hidden in coral, the cedar ship sailing under painted stars, the golden treasures from Punt, the Queen's serene command, the sailor's garlic bread and Enet games, the storm, the fallen obelisk, the dolphins dancing in Minoan waves, the fierce clash with the sea peoples, the careful spells against impossible crocodiles, the sealed bronze jars guarding memories older than memory, and finally, the faint outline of a lost land swallowed gently by the same water that has held you so tenderly all this time. They don't crowd or clamored, they simply rest, overlapping like layers of translucent silk, until the whole long history of ancient Egypt's hidden love affair with the sea feels like a single, slow breath you've been holding and are now ready to release. The water rocks you one last time, barely a sway, more a reminder that motion and stillness can be the same thing when you ray this relaxed. Your body is heavier than it has ever been tonight, yet lighter too, as though the ocean has taken every last bit of tension and carried it away on an invisible tide. Limbs float loosely, fingers unfurled, toes pointed downward in perfect surrender. Your chest rises and falls so slowly that whole minutes seem to pass between breaths. Thoughts, when they come, are soft and rounded. A cat on a mast, a monkey in a tiny hat, a lettuce leaf drifting on stormy waves. Each one brings the faintest smile to your lips before melting into the warm blue. The light above grows softer still, more like moonlight on bedroom walls than actual surface glow. You sense your own bed waiting, the familiar tip of mattress, the weight of covers, The faint scent of pillow and sheet that means home. The transition is seamless. As natural as falling asleep mid-sentence. The CDOESNTN. It simply becomes the quiet dark behind your eyelids. The current DOESNT stop. It becomes the gentle rise and fall of your own breathing. There is nothing left to see. Nothing left to discover. The library has given everything it meant to give. And you have received it with open, drifting hands. The ancient sailor's stars blink once more in farewell. Then dim the bronze jars, seal themselves in silence. The dolphins leap one final time and vanish into silver. All that remains is the profound, delicious certainty that you are safe, that you're carried, that you may let go completely. You feel yourself settling slowly, lovingly into the embrace of your own bed. The water is gone, yet its warmth lingers in your skin, in your muscles, in the deepest part of your chest. The hush of the ocean has become the hush of your room. The distant hum of waves, now the soft rhythm of blood in your ears. Eyelids that have been heavy for hours finally close without effort, sealing the night's journey behind them like a treasure safely stored. The last sensation is one of gentle gratitude from the sea, from the library, from the long ago people who built ships and wrote spells and dreamed beneath the same stars you carry now. Their content, your content, everything is exactly as it should be. Sleep comes not as a descent, but as a drifting sideways into endless, velvet quiet. The stories will wait patiently in the soft folds of your dreams, ready to surface whenever the waves call again. And tonight, the waves are silent. The current has carried you all the way home now. Your body is heavy and warm beneath the covers, every muscle loose, every breath deep and even. The ancient sea has released you gently, leaving only the faintest trace of salt on your lips and the quiet glow of distant stars behind your closed eyes. The library's halls are folded away like a lullaby finished to its final note. All that remains is this soft, lingering hush, the kind that wraps around you after a long journey and whispers that you're safe, that you're home, that you may simply be. Let your thoughts drift one last time, slow as bubbles rising through warm water. Let them carry away the last glimmers of cedar and gold, of dolphins and lettuce leaves, of queens and sailors and forgotten lands. There is nothing more to hold, nothing more to seek. The night is wide and kind. Your dreams are waiting, patient and deep as the ocean itself, ready to cradle everything you've brought back with you. So breathe out, long and slow. Feel your body sink a little deeper into the mattress, into the dark, into rest. Tonight, let the world be gentle with you. Let the stars keep their ancient watch. Let the sea rock you in its memory. May your dreams be long and peaceful, full of quiet voyages and soft light. Good night.